Hi everyone, I wanted to go ahead and create a separate video that kind of walks you through essay number one, our first essay of this semester. The topic is about language and the power of language. And our essential question is the relationship between language and how we see the world. That's coming from your very first article this week, excuse me, reading 1.1 from David Ludden. He says in that article that we see the world according to the framework our language imposes on us. I know that's a little bit heady. It's kind of hard to think about what that might mean, but essentially the essay is asking you to kind of flip that statement into a question and ask, does language impact how we see the world? Does it impact how we see ourselves? Does it impact our choices, our behavior, how we navigate our world, right? Is that somehow related to our language? So you have two different approaches with this essay. The very first one is more objective, right? That is, what do you think about language influencing our world in general, right? You can use your own experience in this approach if you want to. It's not required. But to think about, how does language influence basically everything, right? And all of the readings that we are going to do in the next 3 and 4 weeks will help add different kind of facets to this question, different angles, different lenses. So that way you're not writing an essay just entirely on David Ludden's thinking, right? You're writing an essay where you're kind of using Ludden's foundation to begin to think about what's the relationship between language and basically everything else, right? So question number one is more objective in that way. Question number two, or approach number two, not question number two, sorry, approach number two is more of a personal response, right? As in, how has language influenced your worldview? Now, for those of you who speak more than one language, you may know that answer almost automatically, right? You may be able to kind of tease out how one language might affect your behaviors and actions and thoughts over another language. Then that's something that you might choose to write about. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you can. So you have an option to make this a little bit more of a personal academic essay, or at least an academic essay that's got more of a personal focus versus approach number one. Either one you can write about. Again, approach number one is more objective. Approach number two is more personal. And I don't expect you to know even what your approach is yet, right? Because you're just hearing this about this essay. You probably haven't even read the Ludden article yet. It's not until our second or third week in this unit that we'll really start kind of thinking about your approach and how you think you might be writing this essay. Your audience for this essay is us as a class, an interested group of folks who want to know your opinion. You can assume that we've all read the Ludden articles because he's, again, kind of the foundation for this essay. So assume that we've all read that. You don't have to summarize his key points. But the other articles you do, because not everyone is going to use all of the same articles for their support. The essay structure, this is an academic argument, which basically just means that you are writing an essay that does require a thesis, and that you will be supporting that thesis with evidence and your own analysis and your thinking. It's not a traditional argument, meaning you don't need a rebuttal, you don't need a counter argument, you don't need a concession. We will write that essay, but that's not this essay. This essay is basically a thesis-driven essay in which you are supporting your position with analysis and evidence. The requirements for this essay, so this is kind of those minimum standards that I mentioned in the syllabus. You need to have an introduction. Your thesis needs to be in the essay somewhere. Typically and traditionally, the thesis is at the very last line of the introduction paragraph. But for those of you who like to put your thesis first, or you like to put your thesis last, for this essay, you have some freedom with wherever you want your thesis to be. In other essays, you won't have that kind of freedom. But for this first one, if you want to experiment with putting your thesis somewhere else, you can do that. One thing that we are working on this semester is that you should no longer be writing a 3-part thesis. I know. For some of you, that's going to be super hard. But the 3-part thesis is too formulaic for this kind of writing. It's too formulaic for the complexity that you're going to be needing to write about here. The 3-part thesis in sum is about, here's my example. This essay will be about books, Morgan Freeman, and cheese. By the way, these are 3 of my favorite things. Paragraph 1 is about books. Paragraph 2 is about Morgan Freeman. Paragraph 3 is about cheese. The problem with that is that you're writing isolated paragraphs that aren't cohesive. They aren't connected, and they aren't moving organically through your thinking. So don't worry. We will talk about how to get beyond that 3-point thesis. I know it's like the comfortable sweater that you want to wear because it's what you know, but now it's time to move to the next step. Not that the 3-point thesis was wrong, because it was right for earlier courses, but now we need to move past that, right? So we'll be working more on that. And you need a conclusion paragraph, right? I mentioned already that you don't need all of the traditional argumentative elements. I always, in all of my essay assignments, I always give you an assignment snapshot, and this just kind of puts all into one place, all the requirements, so you don't have to go hunting through the document for all the stuff, right? So here's your assignment. Your audience is our class. You need to have 3 credible sources at least. 2 of them have to be from class readings, and 1 of the 2 of them should be leaden. If you want to use only sources from the class, great, you can. You don't have to go out and do any extra research unless you want to, but you can. You need to have at least 3 resources. They can be from course material. We will be using MLA. You will need a works cited page. Don't worry about that yet. We'll talk more about that once we get through the draft. Remember that for the word count, you've got 5,000 words over the course of the semester and 3 essays. So I'm giving you here a recommended word count. I give you a recommended word count for all 3 essays, just for those of you who like to kind of get a sense of how long should this essay be. It really is up to you. If you feel like you really are struggling with this topic, that's fine. You can write a shorter essay, but it means essay 2 and essay 3 are going to need to be longer. It might be that you've got a lot to say about this topic. Great. That means that essay 2 and essay 3 can afford to be a little shorter. So it's totally up to you, right? Your due dates. Your rough draft is not due until February 16th. Your essay is due March 2nd. So for the rough draft, what will happen is you will give me access to your Google Doc. And again, we'll talk more about this. But you'll give me access to your Google Doc, and I will give you feedback actually on your rough draft. And then you'll have at least a week to revise. Conferences. The essay conferences are kind of like an assignment. They're 5 points. So if you meet during an essay or for an essay conference, you get the 5 points. If you decide it's not my deal, then you just don't get those points. I have conferences the week that before the rough draft is due. So that's the week of February 6th. You would want to meet with me that week if you're the kind of person who needs to talk through your ideas. You just need to bounce some ideas off of somebody. I have conferences the week of the rough draft, meaning if you need to kind of go over where you think you're headed, you want to review maybe the flow of your paper, your organization, you have got questions, great, meet with me that week. The week of February 20th, that is the week that you get your rough draft feedback returned to you. So if you know that you're the kind of student who needs to review the rough draft feedback, then conference with me then. You're the kind of person who likes to conference all the time? Schedule different conference dates. You can do that. You can meet with me more than once. I would love it if you met with me at least once for each essay. And again, part of that is because if we were in class, right, if we were in our face-to-face class, during class, I would come up to you and say, hey, how's your essay going? What questions do you have? How can I help? And so the conferences are a way for me to try to do that virtually. The conferences do take place on Zoom. Camera's optional. I mean, it'd be nice to see you since it's just me and the black screen, but if you don't feel comfortable with your camera on, that's okay. You can leave it off. And more information about the conferences will become available once we come closer to those conference weeks. Other considerations, right? For the essay, just remember that you don't want me to be your editor. You don't want me to do your proofreading for you. You want to make sure you do that. But you have a lot of freedom on this essay, and you might be used to a very prescriptive prompt. That's not how I operate at all. I think that part of the critical thinking that we all have to do is we've got to kind of figure out our own path. And so you have kind of a general question, and we'll talk more about it, but you have a variety of different ways that you can approach that question. So we'll be exploring more of what that might look like in the coming weeks and with all of the different readings that you're going to be reading. These are our learning objectives, and that's it. So take a deep breath. It's okay. I will tell you that I always find it's really important to give the essay assignment at the beginning of the unit. So don't feel like we're going to be writing an essay next week, right? We have over a month until the essay is due. But I feel like it's super important for you to know what you're going to be working towards as you begin the readings. As a student, I was always super frustrated with teachers who would wait until we're like 3 weeks into a unit and then they'll say, okay, here's your essay topic. And as a student, I'm like, well, if I had known that, I would have been paying different attention as I was going through all the readings. So I'm giving it to you up front so you have it. Now that you know what it's about, kind of set it aside and go ahead and start working on the readings and really beginning to kind of think about language, right? And you can even talk to other folks about it too if you'd like. All right. If you have questions, again, don't hesitate to let me know. I'm here to help support you. Have a great day.